Hello, everybody. Welcome to another webinar. And today we're going to be digging into a topic that's more pertinent than ever: physician recruitment. But it's not just the post a job and hope for the best kind or recruitment strategies that are stuck in the past. We're going to be talking about real intentional engagement today. So how you can draw physicians in before they even click apply, and then keep them in touch, engaged, and interested in proceeding. Because here's the reality. 84% of physicians say they're open to new opportunities, but only 11% are actively job hunting. That gap is where engagement matters. So today, I'm joined by our not so old friend, Kevin Kirkpatrick, but he has been a friend for a while. Kevin is the founder and chief talent strategist at Avery Professional Group, a physician recruiting agency serving clients across the US and Canada. Kevin has over 20 years experience in healthcare recruitment and is a wealth of knowledge for us, and I'm hopeful for you too today. So, hello, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Adam.
It's good to see you again.
You too.
And to get real about physician recruitment again. So I'd like to start with the word engagement. It gets used in every hiring strategy slide deck, but often with no clear definition. When it comes to physician recruitment, what does engagement actually mean to you?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because if you look at traditional things that look towards engagement, where we think applications, we think clicks and impressions and all of these other things, and realistically, what we should be looking at from an engagement standpoint is discussions and people asking you questions and interacting with you, right? 1,000 likes with no candidates, it doesn't have more value than one candidate that's reached out to you because they have questions, right?
Okay. It'd be good if you could share, like, what is bad engagement, like what is false engagement or isn't actually engagement, and then what is the converse actual engagement?
Yeah, so a lot of stuff is, we post something somewhere and then it gets a lot of online traffic, and it gets might get shared, it might get likes, it might get some comments and stuff like that, but nobody interacts with us with the real value of considering a role, right? So it's really about relationship building and communication and building interactions that are between two people and not between a couple buttons on an internet, right?
Yeah. Have you got any examples of where it's worked in some of your work?
Yeah. So I kind of want to throw out a caveat. So in the last year, I've looked at kind of what jobs have we filled quicker, which jobs have taken longer, which jobs haven't filled. And this is where culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Is that if you aren't creating an environment that people want to come to, then they're not going to apply, right? So understanding what the applicants want and what the physicians want and identifying and marketing that will increase your engagement. Whereas people that put up an ad and it talks about what the organization wants and what the value to the organization filling it will be, people are going to gloss over it, right? And a lot of work that I've been doing is developing models around better job ads and describing the roles better.
Yeah. Especially nowadays when there's so much out there, so much evidence that putting effort into your job ad, making it candidate centric, selling the position actually works. But you see, a lot of employers still don't really consider that. What do you think that is? Is it a skills gap, or is it an awareness gap, or something else?
I think it's a focus on a process and not on a relationship, right? So prime example is I just finished a 4-month engagement with a company building out a medical second opinion. So first things first is, what they're offering is part-time work that's virtual. So right off the bat, we know that that's going to attract physicians because it's something different than what they're doing. It's part-time. There's no relocation. There's no real upheaval, right?
Yeah.
So what I did for them was I built my campaign and I only reached out to first degree connections, right? So I reached out to physicians that we'd already connected and that most of them I had conversations with, and I shared a very casual message or grouping of messages to those first degree connections. And over 4 months, we hired 10 specialists. Wow. Right. So it was a case of dealing with people that are already engaged with you and dealing with people that are looking for what you're offering, and what you're offering is an opportunity for them to progress in their careers. It's not just the same job somewhere else. So, I really think building that talent pool and building those connections and relationships where it's almost like you're asking a friend if they're interested in this really cool new project.
Yeah. I saw a stat here before the webinar that according to Jackson Physician Search, 46% of physicians say feeling personally connected to a health system mission was a key factor in deciding to apply. We see that as well in our nurse recruitment, that like money and pay is one thing, maybe attracts people in or makes them say no. But if you're within that range that they're interested in, things like your online reputation, the brand, the employer brand, if they see people that are similar to them, what they can hear from employees, other current employees, is really impactful and really important.
Well, it's interesting. So I did a seminar last month for a group of 30 recruiters for a health system. And part of what I was trying to get them to understand is these are relationships, right? And I'll say that word probably another 30 times during this webinar. But, when someone is looking at changing jobs and uprooting their family potentially, like, these are not simple decisions. This is not a decision to go work for the competitor across the street because they're so geographically diverse. The health centers and clients and stuff like that, it could involve a relocation, right? And because of that, you need to display a certain amount of empathy and consideration for the situation they're in. And I was trying to impart on this group that you almost have to be like a career coach, right? And be like, okay, well, this is why you might want to consider this, and understanding the why. And the only way you're going to understand the why is if you're engaged with your existing physicians and you understand what the existing physicians are there for. Right. And if you build an engaging platform and an engaging relationship with those physicians, they'll also recruit physicians for you because they'll say, hey, Dr. Smith, you need to talk to Kevin. Yeah. Right. And then what happens is it's a conversation. It's not a blind resume application somewhere. And it's building that. And we've got so much AI for things like outreach and stuff like that we, at some point, I think physicians specifically, because that's my expertise, are going to want to be building a relationship with a person and to know what it's like to work somewhere because they've talked to a physician, not because we've had them talk to a chatbot for 20 minutes, right?
Yeah. No, AI can make that easier, I suppose, to actually get them in front of a real person by handling some of the more mundane or repetitive tasks that people have to, go through an application form, for example. Say it takes 15 minutes. If you can do that through a chat interface, or just uploading a resume or linking your LinkedIn, for example, and it knows automatically everything it needs to know about you, then that will really empower, I think, recruiters.
I think the value of AI is going to be opposite of what people think. Like, I think the value is going to funnel more impactful conversations by allowing recruiters to spend less time doing LinkedIn searches and more time talking to people. So I think you'll see an instance where small recruiting firms will have the volume of the larger firms because the administrative stuff that's time consuming is looked at by AI. Because I do think that, physicians hire physicians. So facilitating those conversations, framing those conversations, and providing an expertise, like the value that AI is also going to bring is it's going to allow us to analyze and track things that we couldn't before. So allowing us to make smarter decisions and have more conversations, I think, is the true value of AI.
Mm-hmm. Even if I was thinking last night, it would be really interesting to see an organization release their own podcast about what it's like working there. And instead of these like curated, really kind of corporate, sit down videos where everyone says for like 20 seconds and then there's some fun music, but actually listening into those conversations between staff, I think would be a good new angle for organizations to take.
Well, and I think, before you even post a job, you have to understand what it is that your value is and what it is you're going to offer the market and offer potential physicians, right? So there's where an opportunity for a corporate podcast or a day in the life of the organization, or having them share information about the organization, right? I remember talking to a community recruiter, and the recruiter's daughter is a family physician, and they were doing palliative care guidelines for family physicians to reduce the necessity to be referred to a palliative care physician, right? So it was something that I was like, this is not being done other places. So, do a podcast, share with other people, share what you're doing, elevate others at the same time. And what you end up doing is you elevate yourself as an expert, right?
Yeah. That's what we're trying to do here as well, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it does work when we get engagement, and it certainly works. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you said prior to this conversation. You told me that some of the best recruitment happens before there's even a vacancy. Not enough organizations invest in the lead up where relationships, visibility, and trust are built. So really practically, how would a physician recruiter who's got a list of like 20 recs that they have to fill actually go about improving how they engage with candidates?
Yeah, so I think first you've got to get how you engage internally better, right? So I think you need to identify, whether let's say respirology, right? So you want to talk to the chief of respirology. You want them invested in the process as well, so that we're not saying, hey, recruiter, you need to do everything, right? So the recruiter needs to facilitate discussions with candidates and the chief of respirology, right? So it's a matter of facilitating relationships, because in order to get a candidate, hired, you obviously have to get them through the medical leadership, right? So I think part of it comes down to leveraging an understanding of the role. And this again was where AI is good too, is that we can leverage AI's ability to research, because we can determine, the average salary of a respirologist, so that we know how to prepare for the market, so that we're not spending 6 months recruiting knowing that we're below market, right? So we can know we're below market right from the get-go and stuff like that. And the thing with physicians that I've found is a bit different is if you can't answer their first 3 to 5 questions, you will not get engagement, right? Because they're being approached by 7-8 recruiters a week, if not more. So the recruiter that can say, hey, listen, this is the schedule, this is the call structure, this is the equipment we use, these are the procedures we do, this is the volumes, this is our market share, and answer those questions from the onset, then all of a sudden the person can start envisioning themselves in the role. They can envision whether they're interested, which then means they can either commit to the process, because recruiting physicians is not a slow process, not a fast process. Sorry. So you really need to manage the engagement with the candidate to ensure that they go through the process, right? So, that's where, the work you guys have done with nurses by expediting the process goes a long way. We're still working on that with physicians as well, right?
Yeah. Now, process driven is what I'm hearing. And I suppose that would need to be a team effort then. Like, that physician recruiter needs to have their manager and really the department aligned on this. How could the department kind of coalesce around an idea here?
Yeah. So as a third party recruiter, I'm not in the building, right? So I have to put definitive effort into understanding what I'm recruiting for and understanding what it looks like. So, and one of the things that physicians often complain about is unaligned description of the job, the role, right? So, we describe it as one way, and then next thing you know, they're in it, and it's not what they thought. So, in an effort to avoid that, we really need to dive deep into understanding the environment, understanding the role, so that when we talk to the physician, we can give them an accurate representation of what it is, get the engagement, and then introduce them to our clients. The clients I find that kind of want to throw the job description over the fence to me and say, hey, go, we need a respirologist. Here's the job description, go find it. Those are rarely successful, right? Because the first thing that happens is I go to all the respirologists in my database and I email them asking them if they're interested in a new opportunity. But if I cannot find the hot button that's going to engage them because I don't know enough, I'm wasting time.
Yeah. No, you have to have the information there already then to plan your strategy. I think that once a physician expresses interest, you have a process that they're going to experience and interact with. So that can reinforce excitement, or it can make them rethink everything and back out and potentially ghost you. Yeah. So what's something that our physician recruiter in their organization could do to make that process feel more like a dialogue than a transaction?
A lot of it comes down to moving at an appropriate pace. You can't always move too fast because people will feel rushed, but you can't move too slow because, it's like anything else. If someone doesn't return your call, you start automatically assuming they're not interested in you, right? So, prime example is I had a client and we were able to present 22 candidates to them. Right. So 22 physicians screened and presented to the client. We hired 3. Right. And what ended up happening, and this is why they're no longer a client, is that more often than not, they took too long. It was too arduous of a process and candidates went elsewhere.
Right. Yeah.
So
classic.
Of those 22, 19 people were conversations back and forth that led to a candidate not getting a new job and a client not getting a new physician. So I think you really need to ensure that the client understands the rules of engagement and understands that you need to respond in a timely manner. Yeah. And as a physician recruiter, we need to manage that relationship and set those expectations, right? So I used to use a tactic where I'd say, if I email you, it's just an update. I don't need anything actionable. But if I call you or leave a voicemail, that means that I've got something urgent, and because of that, I need a call back in 24 hours, right? It was just a simple conversation with the client up front that says, these are my expectations. Are you okay with that? And then we adhere to that, right? Because, feedback is one of the biggest things that people complain about across all recruitment is they don't get feedback. I don't know anything. So you have to build in a structure that provides feedback through the process so that people stay engaged. And recruiting in healthcare is never fast enough because it's a 24/7 environment predominantly. So knowing that it's never going to be fast enough, you need to learn to communicate enough so that people understand why things are taking the time they're taking. Because if I say, hey, listen, the chief of staff's going on holidays for 2 weeks, so we're not going to hear anything in 2 weeks, then that person at least has an expectation. We've set an expectation. Then middle of that 2 weeks, I'm going to send them a note that says, hey, just want to let you know, Chief's still away. Any questions I can answer in the meantime, right? So every Friday morning, I block half an hour to email all of my clients and all of my candidates in process.
Right.
So that at least once a week, and it's hard, but that's why we have ATSs and things like that, is that every Friday morning everybody's getting a message, and then that way I don't have to worry about anybody being in the dark. Right? Usually I Friday mornings I have more coffee than I might on another day, but it's
pre-weekend
right?
buzz gets you over. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm old, so by 9 o'clock on Friday night, I'm usually going to bed anyways.
Nothing better to do. Well, I would appreciate it if I was a candidate, and when I'm looking through our ATS, if I see that we haven't been in touch with someone in a couple of weeks, it is like, it's annoying because that's their experience of us as well as a brand, as well as the client.
Well, and it's not like, this is where posting on social media, blogs, postings, text messaging, all of these other ways of engaging them and interacting with them makes them feel like they're still involved, right? So, you could tag them on a post, or, well, not everybody likes that because they might not want their existing employer to know they're talking to you, but like sharing blog posts, sharing information, anything that starts to build a relationship with them that does this. And it's something I'm constantly working on. I'm nowhere near perfect at it, and I find I have some candidates that text messages are the best way to go, because it's just a quick text, say, hey, I haven't heard anything, I'll call them again tomorrow, and then it's just constantly closing the loop over and over again, so that you're not leaving anybody out of the loop, right?
Keep the loop looping. I don't know. We can think of a buzzword, a wee buzzy title for that.
Keep the loop looping. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how that's going to look, but let's go with it.
Okay, so we talked about engagement before they apply, during their application process. I'd just like to know, you've mentioned bringing maybe a physician in currently working at the organization to talk to them. At what stage would you recommend doing that?
Before they even interview.
Okay.
Right? Because a prepared interview is not, and I'll say this, interview should not be a Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah.
Right? This should not be a case of, we're going to grill this person. We're going to, it should be a conversation of understanding each other, understanding what that person knows and their experience, and getting all of those things. So I prefer for a physician to have spoken to the chief or the person that they're going to report to before they do an interview, right? Because the other thing is, that's another thing to consider, is that if you tell them about the program and you tell them about the role, they can answer more relevantly, right? Like catching someone cold and asking them a question, like, these are people that predominantly research things and have researched things their entire career, and then we're like, oh well, let's throw cold questions at them. Like, it's it's not an exam, right? They're already examined and certified. It's a matter of understanding the individual and the fit, and sharing the knowledge of what the job looks like, so that we can engage them. So, in my process, usually I will talk to them first and hopefully I know enough to get the engagement. Then I prefer they talk to the physician leader that they would report to, then move into your traditional HR process, where they probably have a panel interview, and then maybe there might be a site visit afterwards, at which point then you move into negotiations and references and license verification and all of that stuff.
Right? Yeah, because you haven't won them yet. I think people don't realize that. Like, I think interview is I'm judging you, but whenever it's a hard to fill position like this, like you said, or on the research point, you're really still trying to win them over. Probably interviewing other places.
We have more vacancies in Canada and the United States for physicians than we have physicians. So automatically, the power, so to speak, is in the hands of the physician. So we are luring them the entire time, right? So this notion of like, I'm going to put you through a gauntlet to make sure you're good enough, it's a bit of an old school, white coat scenario, but realistically, we need to have conversations that ensure that both parties can deliver on what they want to deliver on to be successful.
There's a famous, there's a show called Monty Python. Have you heard of that? The guy, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. And I don't think there was the physician going to that call does either, but too often they get it.
Well, I've done corporate work, like when I was managing hospital recruiting departments. Like, I used to drive me nuts because people would be like, okay, there's going to be 7 people on a panel. And it's like, that's not a comfortable discussion. Right. And maybe I'm too informal, but I'm a believer in building relationships of transparency and honesty, where we're having a conversation to see if something's going to work for everybody. Right. Like, at this point in the 17 years I've had the company, I've only had to replace 2, and both were due to illness. And most of my placements are there 4 years later. So, quality is much better than quantity. And, that comes down to building relationships and having two-way communication.
Absolutely. That's a really impressive rate, only 2 in so many years. What?
I don't move quickly. I'll be the first to admit that maybe I could move quicker, but I like people to, the saying I've always had is, by the time it comes to make a decision, I want to make sure you don't have any questions, right? If I'm a hiring manager, the process will go as long as it takes for you to be willing to say, no, we're hiring this person, right? And vice versa for the candidate. It's got to go long enough and there's got to be enough information shared that the second that offer comes up, they're saying yes. I don't rarely ever see a scenario where someone says, can I have a week to think about it? Most of the people respond within 48 hours, right? So, maybe that's a healthcare thing or a physician thing. I don't, I've been in healthcare so long, I don't know what the tech world or anything like that is like, but rarely do I have a situation where they need a ton of time to think about it, because we should have been doing that during the process.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing this. We're coming up on our time, so I've got just a quick lightning round of 3 questions. If you could give me a sentence answer for them before we go. So,
all right.
Give us one low-cost, high-impact change that any employer of physicians could make this week to improve their engagement.
Understand what it is you're recruiting for and ensure that all of your communication shares that information.
Thank you. What's one outdated recruitment tactic physician recruiters need to leave behind?
I think it still comes down to focusing on what you're looking for as opposed to focusing for what they want, right? So understanding what it is you can offer and understanding the market.
All right. Finally, what's the most creative or unexpected engagement strategy you've seen actually work in physician recruitment?
All right. So this is a good one. So I was on Reddit the other day. Well, the other day is like a couple months ago, and my wife was in a bad mood. So I'm on Reddit looking for memes to send her, and I accidentally came across a internal medicine. I think they're called threads, an internal medicine thread. So I started sharing information about physicians wanting to relocate to Canada and things of that nature. I placed 6 physicians that I met through the Reddit thread. And I'm telling you that the reason for it is I started with engagement. I started with engagement by answering questions and providing an expertise. They don't even know who I am because I'm under I think my title is Next Cantaloupe or something like that, right? So they don't know who I am. They don't know any of this. I'm just providing value, which then engages them in the process.
That's incredible. Six. If like some places would pay what, like 40, 50 grand a hire, like that's incredible, value to an organization. That's not even thinking how much they're going to generate for the organization.
Yeah. Well, let's say they were gastroenterologists, 6 of them would be 12, $13 million in revenue off of a bit of time hanging out on Reddit, right? So, but it comes down to being an expert at what you do and sharing and providing information, just like we're doing here, right? Like it's providing that expertise and guidance and not being a transactional person.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I think that's a great sentence to end on, not being transactional, to engage physicians and really elevate your recruitment into 2025. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to the next one. Yeah.
Sounds good.